Ever get hit with like a burst of creativity at 2 a.m? Like when everyone else is asleep and your brain just suddenly decides it's time to work.
Oh, yeah.
I've been there way too many times, I think.
Yeah.
But the problem is finding a device that can actually keep up with those late night creative, sprints.
Oh, absolutely. It's a constant struggle for creative professionals, right? They need something powerful enough for all those really demanding tasks, but also something they can take with them.
Yeah, exactly. Like, how do you balance that power and portability?
Yeah, it's a real dilemma.
Yeah.
And, we've heard this feedback a lot from the creative community. There's this constant push and pull between wanting a device that can do it all, but is also light and portable.
It's true. Okay, so that brings us to the Asus ProArt PZ13. And this device is saying it can bridge that gap starting at $1,999 though. So it's a pretty big investment.
It is.
So does it actually deliver? That's what we're here to figure out. We've got a ton of articles and reviews and even some user feedback, and we're going to dive deep and see if this is like the ultimate creative companion or not.
What's really interesting here? It's how Asus is really like going after this niche of creative professionals who are always on the go.
Oh, yeah.
They're not trying to make something for everyone. They're focusing on solving specific problems.
I love that specificity. Let's unpack it all. First up, portability.
Okay.
One source said this thing is ridiculously light, like lighter than a coffee and muffin combined.
And they're not wrong. The ProArt PZ13 is super light, only 850 grams, and it's thin too, just 9 millimeters. Think about it, like a stack of credit cards.
Wow, you could practically slip it in a magazine.
Pretty much.
Okay, so it's definitely portable. But can something that slim actually handle like the demanding stuff creatives need?
Right. Well, that's where the Snapdragon X Plus processor comes in. It might not be as powerful as like some of the top Intel or AMD processors, but it's all about efficiency. Think of it like a marathon runner, not a sprinter.
Oh, I like that. So it's about sustained performance, not just like a quick burst.
Exactly. And that's super important for creative work. When you're working on a complex project for hours, you need something that can keep up without, overheating or dying on you.
That makes sense. Okay, so the ProArt PZ13 seems to be doing well on the power and portability front. But what about those late night work sessions we were talking about? Will this thing last through an all-nighter?
So Asus claims it gets a whopping 19 hours of video playback on one charge.
Wow.
Now, obviously, real-world usage is going to be a little different. But even if you get half of that, you're still looking at a device that can power through a serious work session.
Seriously. That's enough time to watch the entire extended edition of Lord of the Rings twice.
Hypothetically, of course.
Of course.
But yeah, it just goes to show that battery life shouldn't be a major concern here.
Yeah.
You can just focus on your work.
I mean, that's a relief for anyone who's ever gotten that dreaded low battery notification right when they're in the flow.
Oh, the worst.
Speaking of flow, let's talk about the display. People are raving about this Lumina OLED panel. So what's so special about it?
It all comes down to color accuracy. Think about the difference between watching a movie on an old TV compared to a new OLED TV.
Yeah.
The colors on the OLED are so much richer. The blacks are deeper. It's like night and day.
It's like the difference between looking at a postcard and actually being there. Really.
Exactly. And for creative professionals, that level of visual detail is essential. Whether you're editing photos or designing graphics, you need to know that what you see on screen is accurate.
So no more second guessing your color choices.
Nope. The Lumina OLED panel is designed to meet professional standards, so you know your work will look amazing wherever it's displayed.
That peace of mind has got to be priceless, especially when you're working under a tight deadline.
Oh, for sure.
But something I keep thinking about? A lot of creatives struggle with that balance between tablet and laptop features.
Oh, yeah.
Like they might need a touchscreen for sketching, but then also a keyboard and trackpad for the more complex stuff. How does the ProArt PZ13 deal with that?
That's a great point. And it's something the ProArt PZ13 seems to be trying to address. It actually comes with a stylus that has 4,096 levels of pressure sensitivity.
Okay, that sounds impressive. But what does that mean for someone who's actually like sketching a design or painting?
Imagine you're using a real pencil. The harder you press, the darker the line right.
Right.
With 4,096 levels of pressure sensitivity, the stylus can capture those subtle variations in pressure. So you can create all sorts of nuanced strokes and textures.
So it's like having a full art studio right there in your hands.
Pretty much. And get this, the stylus has a crazy long battery life. Like 140 hours of continuous use.
Wow. You practically never have to charge it.
Exactly.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
But what about people who need a keyboard? Is it all touchscreen or are there options?
Well, it seems like it's mainly designed for touchscreen use, but you can get external keyboards. And the ProArt Creator Hub software has some cool features that might bridge the gap.
Creator Hub. Tell me more about that.
One of the things that stood out to me is that you can instantly switch between a color-calibrated creative mode and a presentation mode with just a tap.
Well, that's interesting. Walk me through a scenario where that would be useful.
Yeah.
Like, let's say I'm a graphic designer and I'm working on a logo.
Okay, so imagine you're in creative mode and you're perfecting the logo, getting all the colors and details just right.
Right.
Then you need to show it to your client. Boom, one tap, and you switch to presentation mode, which basically optimizes the display settings to make your work look amazing.
So it's like having a personal assistant who knows exactly what you need and when you need it.
Exactly. It takes all the hassle out of manually changing the settings every time you switch between tasks. You can just focus on your creative vision.
That's a really smart feature. Okay, so far the ProArt PZ13 seems like it's ticking a lot of boxes for creative professionals. It's portable, powerful, has an incredible display, and it even has some pretty innovative software features. But the big question is, at $1,999 is it really worth the investment?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And to answer that, I think we need to look at what people are actually saying about the device. How are they using it? What are their pain points?
That's a great point. Let's shift gears and dive into that real-world feedback. What's the word on the street about the ProArt PZ13?
That's what we're going to explore next. We're going to look at the reviews, the comparisons, and what users are saying to see if the ProArt PZ13 really lives up to all the hype.
Ooh, this is getting good.
Yeah.
All right, stay tuned for part 2 where we unpack the real-world performance of the ProArt PZ13 and see if it deserves a spot in your creative toolkit.
All right, so let's move from like the theoretical stuff and get into what people are actually saying about the ProArt PZ13. You know, specs and promises are one thing, but how it performs in the real world, that's the real test.
For sure. So are people loving it, or are there some warning signs we should be aware of?
Well, overall, the feedback seems pretty positive. People are consistently praising how portable it is and how sleek the design is. They love that you can just throw it in your bag and work from anywhere. Coffee shops, parks, airplanes. It seems like the ProArt PZ13 is popping up everywhere.
That fits perfectly with that whole work from anywhere lifestyle that's so popular these days.
Yeah.
But what about the performance? Does the Snapdragon X Plus processor actually live up to the hype?
So far, it seems to be handling like everyday creative tasks without any issues. People are saying it runs smoothly for photo editing, graphic design, even some light video editing.
So maybe it's not going to replace your main desktop computer for those super intense projects.
Right.
But for most creative workflows, it seems like it gets the job done.
Exactly. And that's an important point to remember. It's not about having the absolute most powerful device. It's about finding the right balance of power and portability for your specific needs.
Totally. And speaking of balance, we talked earlier about how some creatives struggle with choosing between a tablet and a laptop. Some people need that tactile feel of a keyboard, while others really want that touchscreen flexibility. How does the ProArt PZ13 handle this kind of dilemma?
Yeah, well, the fact that it doesn't have a built-in keyboard seems to be a deal breaker for some people.
Yeah, I can see that.
It's definitely made for those who are comfortable working primarily with a touchscreen. But, you know, a lot of users have said that they've adjusted their workflow to make it work. Some use external keyboards or rely more on voice dictation for things like writing.
So I take a little getting used to, especially for people who are really attached to their laptops.
Yeah, but on the flip side, the stylus is getting rave reviews. People are saying it's super precise and responsive. It feels really natural to use, whether you're sketching, drawing, or even just taking notes.
That makes sense. I mean, we talk about those 4,096 levels of pressure sensitivity.
Yeah.
And it sounds like that really makes a difference. It creates a much more intuitive and expressive experience.
For sure. And don't forget about that long battery life on the stylus. No more getting interrupted by a low battery warning right when you're in the zone.
That's the worst. Okay, so the stylus is a winner. Portability is a hit. Performance seems really solid for everyday creative work.
Mm-hmm.
But what about that amazing Lumina OLED display we were gushing over earlier? Are people actually as impressed with it in real life?
It's definitely one of the standout features. Users keep mentioning the vibrant colors, the deep blacks, and the insane level of detail.
Yeah, remember that analogy we used about the difference between looking at a postcard and actually being there?
Yeah.
It sounds like that's exactly the kind of experience people are having with this display.
It's particularly noticeable for photographers and videographers. The color accuracy is spot on, so you can edit your work and know that it's going to look exactly how you intended it to.
That's got to be a huge relief. It's like you don't have to worry about how your work is going to look on different screens or anything like that.
Nope. You're seeing the truest representation of your work right there on the ProArt PZ13's display.
I love that.
Ah.
Okay, so Asus really knocked it out of the park with the display. But there's one thing we haven't talked about yet. The ProArt Creator Hub software. What are people saying about how it impacts their creative workflows?
Well, we mentioned earlier that you can easily switch between creative mode and presentation mode. And that seems to be a feature that people are really finding useful.
It's like having your own little tech assistant, right?
Exactly. It just takes away all those little frustrations of having to manually adjust settings or trying to remember which color profile works best for what. You can just focus on creating.
I'm all about anything that streamlines my workflow. Okay, so it's not just about the hardware. It's about how the software enhances the experience.
Exactly. It's all about creating a really smooth and intuitive experience for the user.
I love it. Okay, so we've heard a lot of positives.
Yeah.
But every device has its flaws,
Right.
What are some of the criticisms that keep popping up?
One thing that people mention a lot is the screen brightness. It's totally fine for working indoors, but it can be tough to see outdoors in direct sunlight.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. The screen just isn't bright enough to compete with the glare.
Exactly. So that's definitely something to keep in mind if you work outside a lot.
For sure. Any other potential drawbacks?
Well, we already talked about the lack of a physical keyboard, which is a deal breaker for some. And there have been a few reports of the touchscreen being a bit too sensitive. Sometimes it registers accidental inputs.
Oh, man. That's never fun. Especially when you're working on something really detailed.
No, it's not. But to be honest, those seem to be pretty minor issues compared to all the positive feedback. Most people seem to agree that the ProArt PZ13 is well-designed, capable, and delivers on its promises of power and portability.
Sounds like Asus really did their research and listened to what creative professionals actually need. But there's still one big question lingering. The price, at $1,999. It's a pretty big investment. So is it really worth it?
That's the question we're going to tackle in the final part of our deep dive. We'll weigh the pros and cons, look at some alternatives, and help you decide if the ProArt PZ13 is the right tool for you.
Okay, so we've covered a ton of ground. We've gone through the specs, talked about the features, and even heard what real users are saying.
Yeah.
But it all comes down to this. Is the Asus ProArt PZ13 really worth that $1,999 price tag?
Yeah, it's definitely a big chunk of change, but I think it's important to think about it a little differently. It's not just about the upfront cost, it's about the value it brings to your creative process.
I like that. So maybe instead of asking, can I afford this? We should be asking, can I afford to not have this?
Exactly. Think back to those late night creative sessions we were talking about. Imagine being able to just seamlessly go from sketching an idea on the touch screen to refining all the details with the stylus and knowing your battery is going to last all night.
Right. You don't have to worry about your tools holding you back.
Exactly. It's all about removing those obstacles. And, it's not just about the individual features, it's the whole experience.
Yeah.
A lot of users have said the ProArt PZ13 feels like an extension of their creativity. Like it allows them to work more intuitively.
Yeah, I read this story about a photographer who used the ProArt PZ13 to edit photos on location during a fashion shoot.
Yeah.
And he was saying how the color accuracy of the display let him make all these really precise adjustments, even in that hectic environment.
It's a perfect example of how this device can really change the way you work. It's not just making things easier. It's giving creatives the tools to do their best work no matter where they are.
It's like having a partner in crime, a creative sidekick.
And that brings us to another important point. This device is really specialized. Asus isn't trying to make a device that appeals to everyone. They're laser focused on creative professionals who need that specific balance of power, portability, and precision.
And I think that focus is what makes the ProArt PZ13 so interesting. They're not trying to be everything to everyone.
Yeah.
They're solving specific problems for a specific group of people.
And in a world where so many devices try to be all things to all people, that's really refreshing. It shows that they understand the unique needs and challenges of creative professionals.
Absolutely. It's like they're saying, we see you, we get you, and we built this tool to help you do amazing things.
It's an invitation to be part of a community of creators.
That's cool. So as we wrap up our deep dive, what are your final thoughts on the ProArt PZ13? Is it the game changer it claims to be?
For the right person, I think it absolutely could be. It's not perfect, of course, but it tackles some of the biggest pain points for creative professionals, especially those who are always on the go and need a device that can keep up with them. If you're looking for something that can really boost your creativity, streamline your workflow, and inspire you to push those boundaries, then the ProArt PZ13 might just be the missing piece you've been searching for.
It definitely makes you think about the future of creative work. So if you're a creative professional who's always looking for new ways to bring your ideas to life, I definitely recommend checking out the Asus ProArt PZ13. Who knows? Maybe it'll spark a creative revolution. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and until next time, keep creating.